Devil worship in France. The question of Lucifer, a record of things seen and heard in the secret societies according to the evidence of initiates. And this was published in 1896. And a sequel, Diana Vaughan and the Question of Modern Palladism, was written but not published. And I can't find reference to that, so but chapter 1, Satanism in the 19th century. A short time ago, that ultimate and universal source of reference, the person of average intelligence, had been asked concerning modern diabolism, or the question of Lucifer. What it is, who are its disciples, where is it practiced, and why? He would have replied, probably with the same asperity, the question of Lucifer. There is no question of Lucifer. Modern diabolism? There is no modern diabolism. And all the advanced people and all the strong minds would have extolled the average intelligence, whereupon the matter would have been closed hermetically without disquieting an unwelcome investigation like the present. Now, these presumed narratives, these popular conceptions of history and groups, there is an attempt on social media to enforce these. If you deny a historical event, even be it a tragedy, it does not mean that one is racist or have some other prejudice against a particular group of people. And perhaps it's not the denial of the event. It's the idea that the event doesn't mean what people think it does. It doesn't justify a terrorist state. It doesn't justify terrorist actions as a country. It doesn't justify torturing the innocent or whatever, or basically creating a welfare state that doesn't have to be a welfare state, or whatever the case may be. The great teacher of Christianity beheld Lucifer fall from heaven like lightning, and in a different sense, the modern world had witnessed a similar spectacle. Assuredly, the demon of Milton had been cast down from the sky of theology, and except in a few centers of extreme doctrinal concentration, there is no place found for him. The apostles of material philosophy have, in a manner, searched the universe and have produced, well, the material philosophy. And therein is no question of Lucifer. And the opposite, at the opposite pole of thought, there is, let us say, the spiritualist, in possession of many instruments superior, at least by hypothesis, to the searchlights of science, through which he receives the messages of the spheres and establishes a partial acquaintance with an order which is not of this world. But in that order also there appears to be no question of Lucifer, though vexed questions that are without numbers concerning unprogressed spirits, and that is to say, nothing of the elementary. Between these poles there is the flux and reflux, a multitudinous opinions, but, except at the centers mentioned, there is still no question of Lucifer, it has been shelved or dropped. Now, Lucifer, as a name for a devil, Isaiah 14 is sort of sarcastic in that sort of way. It's not really saying that there is a Lucifer other than the enlightened one at the time, the illuminator, as the term means. I bring the light from Lux Pharos. Lux meaning light, of Pharos, so and Jesus is definitely called Lucifer a few times in the Bible. So why are we looking at the other? Anyways, I made that video, but the revival of mystical philosophy, and moreover of transcendental experiment, which is prosecuted in secret to a far greater extent than the public can possibly be aware, has, however, set many old oracles chattering, and they are more voluble at the present moment than the great Dodonian grove, as might be expected. They whisper occasionally of deeds done in the darkness, which look weird when exposed to the day. The terms Satanism, Luciferianism, Diabolism, and their equivalents have been buzzed frequently, though with some indistinctiveness of late, and in actions and in a sense that indicate the existence of a living terror. People do not quite know of what kind, rather than an exploded superstition to be plain. The question of Lucifer has reappeared, and in a manner which must be eminently disconcerting to the average intelligence, and advanced and strong in mind. It has reappeared not as a speculative inquiry into the possibility of a personal embodiment of evil operating mysteriously, but after a wholly spiritual manner. For the propagation of the second death, we are asked to acknowledge that there is a visible and tangible manifestation of descending hierarchy taking place at the close of a century, which has denied that there is any prince of darkness. Now, there are some subjects which impress one at first sight as unserious, but we come to regard them differently when we find that they are being taken seriously. We have been accustomed, with some show of reason, to connect the idea of devil worship with barbarous rites obtaining among savage nations, to regard it, in fact, as a suitable complement of the fetish. Well, isn't the violence and war of modernism far more of a barbarism than any rituals that seem, they're too ecstatic. They're getting into it too much. They should just sit quiet in their pews and not even move with the prayers that they say. It seems hypothetically quite impossible that there can be any person, much as any society or class of persons, who at this day, and in London, Paris, or New York, adore the evil principle. Well, wouldn't that be one of the places you expect it the most? Hence, say that there is black magic activity and function at the present moment, that there is a living cultus of Lucifer, that the black masses are celebrated and involve revolting profanations of the Catholic Eucharist, that the devil appears personally, that he possesses his church, his ritual, his sacraments, that men, women, and children dedicate themselves to his service, or are so devoted by their sponsors that there are people assumed to be sane who would die in the peace of Lucifer, that there are those who regard his region of eternal fire, a variety unknown, to the late Mr. Charles Marvin as the true abode of beatitude. That is to say, all this will not enhance the credibility or establish the intelligence of the speaker. And he wrote a book, The Region of the Eternal Fire, about the petroleum industry of Russia. But this improbable development of Satanism I don't know what else to say. There's a comment I was going to say. Oh yeah, the idea that it's just blasphemy Christianity. Christianity, you could say almost like it's blasphemy of these other faiths, because look at what happened. You had all the holidays were either, Mithraism. We have to have we want to adapt the Mithric cult, so we're going to have them at the same day as Christmas on that same day. But all the other ones, let's do things a week earlier. Or in the case of St. John's Day, a couple nights later, let's celebrate our holiday instead of this other thing that's been observed because of its scientific placement for centuries at the solstices and the equinoxes and the points, directly in between them. Not the Sunday before, not a few days before, not a week before, the cross-quarter nights and stuff. So wouldn't Christianity be blasphemy of the various polytheisms and monotheisms that came before it? But this improbable development of Satanism is just what is being earnestly asserted, and the affirmations made are being taken in some quarters au grand sérieux. I think that's how it's pronounced. They are not a growth of today or precisely of yesterday. They have been more or less heard for some years, but their prominence at the moment is due to increasing insistence for attention to scrupulous exactitude, abundant detail, and demonstrative evidence. Reports, furthermore, have quite recently come to hand from two exceedingly circumstantial and exhaustive witnesses, and these have created distinctly a fresh departure. Books have multiplied, periodicals have been founded, the church is taking action, even a legal process has been instituted. The center of this literature is at Paris, but the report of it has crossed the channel and has passed into the English press, as it is affirmed, therefore, that a cultus of Lucifer exists, and that the men and women who are engaged in it are neither ignorant, nor especially mad, nor yet belonging to the lowest strata of society. It is worthwhile to investigate the matter. At some profit is possible, whether the issue. If the devil be actually among us, then for the sake of much which has seemed crass in the orthodox religion, then completely exonerated, for the sake of the fantastic in fiction, and the lurid in legend, thus unexpectedly actualized, and further as it may be, for the sake of our own souls, we shall do well to know of it. If Abaddon, Apollyon, and the Lord of Flies are to be understood literally, above all, if they are liable to confront us in propria persona, between Freemasons Hall and Duke Street, or between Duke Street and Avenue Road, then the sooner we can arrange a reconciliation with the one church which is consistently and invariably taught that the one full-grown, vile doctrine of devils, and has the bona fide recipes for knowing, avoiding, and at need of exercising them, why the better will it be, more especially if we had previously any leanings towards the conception of an universal order not pivoting on perdition. If On the other hand, what is said to be of the category of Ananias, as distinguished from what the alchemists call the code of truth, it will be well also to know that some portions of the old orthodoxies still wait for their deliverance from the bonds of skepticism, that the actual is to be discriminated from the fantastic by the old text, namely its comparative stupidity, and that we may still create our universe about any pivot that may please us. Now, remember, I made a little video series, Luciferianism Beyond Christianity, in the way that Luciferianism and, well, it's not directly about Satanism, but Satanism itself doesn't have to be a blasphemy of Christianity. It doesn't have to respond to Christianity. Even the more so with Luciferianism. I'm writing ostensibly for Transcendentalists, of whom I am one, as a student of Transcendentalism, that I have been led to examine this modern mystery, equipped as it is with such portentous phenomena. Dabbleism is, of course, a transcendental question, and black magic is connected with white by the same antinomy that connects light and darkness. Moreover, we mystics are all, to some extent, accused by accusations which are preferred in the matter of modern dabbleism, and that is another reason for investigating and making known the result. Left-hand path, right-hand path, same thing, white magic, black magic, green, red, whatever. Let's not moralize these terms in themselves. There is difference between knowledge or faith and ignorance, between righteousness and wickedness. But these terms in themselves, magic, white, black, they don't really pan out that way. There are terms for evil magic in some languages that actually would fit, but I'd hate to use the term black magic only that way. At the same time, the general question has many aspects of interest for that large class which would demur to be termed transcendental, but confesses to being curious. The earliest rumor which I have been able to recall in England concerning existing occult practices to which a questionable purpose might be attributed appeared in a well-known psychological journal some few years since, and was derived from a continental source, being an account of a certain society then existing in Paris, which was devoted to magical practices and in possession of a secret ritual for the evocation of planetary angels. It was an association of well-placed persons denying any connection with spiritualism and pretending to be an acquaintance with more effectual thaumaturgic processes than those which obtain at seances. The account passed unchallenged, for in the absence of more explicit information, it seems scarcely worthwhile to draw attention to the true character of the claim. The secret ritual in question could not have been unknown to specialists in magical literature, and was certainly to myself among these as a fact. It was one of those numerous clavicles of the Goetic art which used to circulate surreptitiously in a manuscript some 2 centuries ago. There is no doubt that the planetary spirits with which the document was concerned were devils in the intention of its author, and must have been evoked as such, supposing that the process was practiced. The French Association was not therefore in a possession of a secret source of knowledge, but as impositions of this kind are to be a priori expected in such cases by transcendentalists of any experience, I, for one, refrained from entering any protest at the time. And if you know anything about the Goetia, the 72 of the Goetia, plus the secret one, and the elemental, our quadrant kings, as they would be said. Each of these are attributed to at least one of 7 planets, the sun, the moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn. And isn't there 22 or 23, something like that, to Lucifer or Venus? And remember, another figure was called Lucifer by calling that one character in the Bible, changing his name to, we're going to call you Abednego. Abed-Nagu. Nagu is the word for Lucifer or Venus. So Daniel was being called Lucifer. Because Daniel was chief in command amongst his buddies. Much about the same period, it became evident that a marked change had passed over certain aspects of thought in the most enlightened city of the world, and that among the jeunesse dorée, in particular, there was a strong revulsion against paramount material philosophy. An epoch of transcendental and mystical feeling was, in fact, beginning. Old associations, having transcendental objects, were in course of revival, or were coming into renewed prominence. Martinists, Gnostics, Kabbalists, and a score of orders are fraternities, of which we vaguely hear about the period of the French Revolution, began to manifest great activity. Periodicals of a mystical tendency, not spiritualistic, not neo-theosophical, but hermetic, Kabbalistic, and theurgic, were established, and met with success. Books which had grievously weighted the shelves of their publishers for something like a quarter of a century were suddenly in demand, and students of distinction on this side of the channel were attracted towards the new center. The interest was intelligible. To profound mystics, the doctrine of transcendentalism has never had but one adversary, which is the density of the intellectual subject. And wherever the subject clarifies, there is idealism in philosophy and mysticism in religion. Moreover, on the part of mystics, especially here in England, the way of that revival had been prepared carefully, and there could be no astonishment that it came, and none, too, that it was accompanied, as it is accompanied, almost invariably, by much that does not belong to it in the way of transcendental phenomena. When, therefore, the rumors of black magic, diabolism, and the abuse of occult forces began to circulate, there was little difficulty in attributing some foundation to the report. A distinguished man of letters, M. Huysmans, who has passed out of Zolaism in the direction of transcendental religion, is, in a certain sense, the discoverer of modern Satanism. Under the thinnest disguise of fiction, he gives in his romance of La Basse an incredible and untranslatable picture of sorcery, sacrilege, black magic, and nameless abominations secretly practiced in Paris, possessing a brilliant reputation, commanding a wide audience, and with the psychological interest attaching to his own personality, which more than literary excellence infuses a contagious element into private views and impressions. He has given currency to the question of Lucifer, has promoted it from obscurity into prominence, and has made it the vogue of the moment. It is true that by his vocation of novelist, he is suspected of inventing his facts, and Dr. Pappas, president of the influential Martinist group in French occultism, has stated quite plainly that the doors of the mystic fraternities have been closed in his face, so that he can know nothing, and that his opinions are consequently indifferent. I have weighed these points carefully, but unless the mystic fraternities are connected with diabolism, which Pappas would most rightly deny, that exclusion does not remove the opportunity of first-hand knowledge concerning the practice of Satanism, and brilliant imagination apart M. Huysmans or Huysman has proved quite recently that he is in mortal earnest by his preface to a historical treatise on Satanism and magic, the work of a literary disciple, Jules Boyce, in criticism, which for general soberness and lucidity does not leave much to be desired. That a number of persons, not specially distinguished from the rest of the world by the mark of the beast in their foreheads, are devoted in secret to the operations of black magic, communicate or seek to communicate with spirits of darkness for the attainment of ambition, the accomplishment of revenge, the satisfaction of their passions, or some other form of ill-doing. He affirms also that there are facts which cannot be concealed, and from which only one deduction can be made, namely that the existence of Satanism is undeniable. To understand the first of these facts, I must explain that the attempt to form a partnership with the lost angels of Orthodox theology, which constitutes black magic, has, in Europe at least, been invariably connected with sacrilege. Well, much more sacrilege than saying the angels are going to obey, the unfallen angels, the loyal host of heaven are going to obey me instead of, God, maybe. Demon worship really kind of sounds less blasphemous, and that's where demonolatry, that type of Satanism, has arisen, because demonolatry tends to be mixed with other faiths that aren't really Satanism, including Christianity. By the hypothesis of demonology, Satan is the enemy of Christ, and to please Satan, the sorcerer must outrage Christ, especially in his sacraments. The facts are as follows. Continuous, systematic, and wholesale robberies of consecrated hosts from Catholic churches, and this is not as a consequence of importing the vessels of the sanctuary, which are often trifling value, and often left behind. The intention of the robbery is therefore to possess the hosts, and their future profanation is the only possible object. Now, before it can be worthwhile to profane the Eucharist, one must believe in the real presence, and this is acknowledged by only two classes, the many who love Christ and some few who hate him. Now, if you look at the New Testament and ignore Paul, the Eucharist and basically what makes Christianity would be out the window. And loving Christ would be following his commandments, not worshiping him. But he is not profaned, at least not intentionally, by his lovers. Hence the sacrilege is committed by his enemies in chief, namely the practicers of black magic. It is difficult, I think, to escape from that position, and I should add that sacramental outrages of this astonishing kind, however deeply they may be deplored by the Church, are concealed rather than paraded, and as it is difficult to get at the facts, it may be inferred that they are not exaggerated, at least by the Church. The occasional perpetration of certain outrageous crimes, including murder and other abominations, in which an element of black magic has been elicited by legal tribunals. But these are too isolated in place, too infrequent in time to be evidence for satanic associations or indication of a prevalent practice. They may therefore be released from the custody of the present inquiry to come up for judgment when called on. There's a lot more Christian-based crime if you look at the reality of things. They may therefore be released from the custody of the present inquiry to come up for judgment when called on. The existence of a society of Palladists are professors of certain doctrines termed Palladism, as demonstrated inter alia by the publication of a periodical review in its interest. M. Usman's facts, therefore, resolve into acts of sacrilege, indicating associations existing for the purpose of sacrilege, which must, however, be regarded as a means and not an end, and the end in question is to enter into communion with devils. Now, the temple, the Satanic Temple, it doesn't seem like there is any theistic thing. They're basically trolling Christians to a certain end. Independently of M. Huysmans, I believe there is no doubt about the sacrilege. It is a matter of notoriety that in 1894, 2 ciboria containing 100 consecrated hosts were carried off by an old woman from the Cathedral of Notre Dame under circumstances which indicate that the vessels were not the objects of the larceny. Similar depredations are said to have increased in an extraordinary manner during recent years and have occurred in all parts of France. No less than 13 churches belonging to the one diocese of Orleans were despoiled in the space of 12 months, and the diocese